outdone. Ex-Confederate John W. Burgess of Columbia's Political Science Department struck one of the loudest notes in mid-cacophony with Reconstruction and the Constitution in 1911. Even after the Dunningite school began to recede before the kinder and gentler revisionism inaugurated by historians Francis Butler Simpkins and Robert Hilliard Woody, South Carolina during Reconstruction, 1932, and the impressively balanced Vernon Lane Wharton, The Negro in Mississippi, 1947, the 1929 Potboiler by journalist-diplomat Claude Bowers, the Tragic Era, the Revolution after Lincoln, congealed racist interpretations of Reconstruction in the popular mind as solidly as had D.W. Griffith's film The Birth of a Nation 14 years earlier. African-American scholars were not silent, only unheard or dismissed by the white academy. In 1913, Du Bois's Crisis Publishing Company printed a useful memoir about Texas politician Norris Wright Cooney by his daughter Maud Cooney Hare. In that same year, the African-American former Speaker of the Mississippi House of Representatives and U.S. Congressman John R. Lynch published Facts of Reconstruction, a memoir taken seriously by no more than a handful of scholars, principally those subscribing to Carter G. Woodson's New Journal of Negro History. In the March 1913 edition of The Crisis, Du Bois exposed historian Ulrich P. Phillips's fallacious conclusions about declining per capita output of African-American cotton growers after the Civil War. Returning to the charge 11 years later in The Reconstruction of Freedom, a large and vigorously argued chapter in his The Gift of Black Folk, he propounded the heterodoxies that slavery was the cause of the Civil War, that African-American motives for helping to win the war had been primarily economic, and that enfranchisement of the slaves was the greatest and most important step toward world democracy of all men of all races ever taken in the modern world. Mainstream historians had deplored universal manhood suffrage in the South as the greatest folly. No language has been spared to describe the results of Negro suffrage as the worst imaginable. Du Bois charged in his essay, which anticipated the main arguments he would develop in Black Reconstruction. Historian Herbert Aptheker reminds us that the year following this essay, Du Bois' second Harvard history professor, Edward Channing, assailed African Americans in the latest volume of his History of the United States. In his pure condition, undiluted by white or yellow blood, the Negro is essentially a communist and a fatalist, this Back Bay aristocrat declared. Against such headwinds, Arutheus A. Taylor published two careful monographs on Reconstruction in South Carolina and Virginia in 1924 and 1926 respectively, while David G. Houston, A. E. Perkins, and Mason J. Brewer, among a handful of other African-American scholars, gamely attempted throughout the late 20s and early 30s to redress the historiographical imbalance. Speaking for the talented 10th, the African-American men and women who had rallied to Du Bois in his leadership contest with Booker T. Washington, Anna J. Cooper, principal of the District of Columbia's elite M Street High School, implored Du Bois to answer the Dunnings and Bowers adequately, fully, ably. Finally, and again, it seems to me, thou art the man. That was precisely what he had already undertaken definitively that year, 1929, in his Encyclopedia Britannica entry, The Negro in the United States. In the final exchange of letters with its editor, he refused to allow Britannica to publish his article unless the following two sentences were included. White historians have ascribed the faults and failures of Reconstruction to Negro ignorance and corruption, but the Negro insists that it was Negro loyalty and the Negro vote alone that restored the South to the Union, established the new democracy, both for white and black, and instituted the public schools. Editor F. H. Hooper regretted that he could not pass the article with his new paragraph, and therefore was compelled to reject it. Although incensed, Du Bois could hardly have been astonished. Only 2 years had elapsed since the first volume of Charles and Mary Beard's